Okay, good morning for the third time. The current time is 9:02 a.m. Eastern Time. My name is Craig Pooler, and I'm the Division Director for the Gear Up and Talent Search team. I want to welcome you to the U.S. Department of Education's Pre-Application Technical Assistance Workshop for the 2023 grant competition under the Gaining Early Awareness and Readiness for Undergraduate Programs, better known as Gear Up. Before we get started, I would like to introduce my staff of professionals that make me look. And I will start with Ginger Allen. Ginger, can you go? I will go next to Marcus Thomas. Marcus is, unfortunately, he's doing our webinar tech part, so he may not be able to go on camera. Thank you,
Can anyone see me? Can you see me?
Next is Antoinette Edwards.
Good morning.
And next is Reggie Jackson.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay. And I'll go back to Ginger to introduce us and say good morning. Okay. Next we have Ben Woodall, who's the Gear Up team lead.
Good morning, everyone.
I will go to Caroline Chung, who's the newest member on our team. It's Caroline.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Okay. And two of our staff members, Nicole Josmans and David Howell, are out today. Did I miss anyone on our team? Hopefully not. Okay. So the presenters for today's webinar is going to be Reggie, Ginger, and Marcus again is doing the technical part of this, so we appreciate it. So back to my script. Note that this year's competition focused only on the Gear Up state programs. There will not be a Gear Up partnership competition for 2023. In today's presentation regarding the program requirements, the application submission process, and also address any questions you may have regarding the competition. Now, I must throw this caveat in there. If we do not have the answer to your question, we will have to research and get back to you. But our goal is to try to answer as most of the questions that come in as possible. We cannot take questions as we go, so we ask that you write down your questions, and then we're going to open up the chat box where you can post your questions after the presentation. So please write down your questions and post them in the chat box once that period opens. We will be presenting a lot of information today, and while we will try to answer as many questions as I said before as possible, we can't promise we will be all inclusive today. Further questions may have to be addressed to our office leadership for final response. I will now turn it over to Reggie, who will start the presentation. Once again, thank you and wish you well. Reggie?
Thanks, Greg. Before we start, we want to present this disclaimer before sharing information during pre-application workshops to ensure that applicants are aware of and understand the official guidelines for this competition. This disclaimer reads as follows. This document is a brief summary of the program regulations and application requirements. Do not rely solely on the information in this document. Please refer to the notice inviting applications, program statute, and program regulations published in the Federal Register for additional information, as these are the official documents governing the competition. Again, please remember the notice inviting applications is the official documents governing the competition. As you can see from the workshop overview, we have a packed agenda of information to share with you today. We'll give a wide-angle look at FY 2023 Gear Up funding levels, program authority, mission, and objectives. We'll talk about several important organizational components of the Gear Up program, including implementation models, the scholarship requirement, and the matching requirement. We'll also discuss how to present your project budget before taking a short break. After the break, we will run through each of the Gear Up selection criteria and this year's competitive preference priorities. We will then discuss important formatting, required forms, and other submission logistics to keep in mind before going live for a question and answer period. The FY 2023 appropriation for the entire Gear Up program totals $388 million. After accounting for non-competing continuation awards, or NCCs, to current funded grantees, we anticipate that approximately $20 million will be available to fund new Gear Up state projects this year. With a maximum award amount of $5 million, we estimate that we will be able to make about 4 or 5 new state awards from this competition. Section 404A through 404H of the Higher Education Act, as amended, gives the U.S. Department of Education the authority to implement the Gear Up program. The program regulations are in Title 34, Part 64 of the Code of Federal Regulations. The statute and regulations are on the Gear Up program website, which is shown here on the slide. So what is the Gear Up program? The Gear Up program is a discretionary grant program that encourages applicants to provide support and maintain a commitment to eligible low-income students, including students with disabilities, to assist the students in obtaining a secondary school diploma and to prepare for and succeed in post-secondary education. Now that you know what the Gear Up program is, you should know that Gear Up has 3 primary objectives that support the program's mission. The first objective is to increase the academic performance and preparation for post-secondary education for students. Objective 2 is to increase the rate of high school graduation and participation in post-secondary education for students. And the last objective is to increase the educational expectations for students and increase student and family knowledge of post-secondary options, preparation, and financing. As mentioned at the start of the workshop this year, the department is only holding a competition for the Gear Up States program. The Gear Up States program enables a state to have a wide-ranging impact over early intervention college preparation and access initiatives in the states, including by providing scholarships to eligible Gear Up students. The range of award sizes is usually in the $3 to $5 million range, with an average of $4 million. $5 million is the maximum award amount for this competition. Gear Up projects can be either 6 years in length or 7 years if you propose to use that 7th year to serve your former Gear Up cohorts participants as they enter their first year of college. Eligible applicants include the 50 states, of course, plus Puerto Rico, District of Columbia, Guam, American Samoa, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, and the freely associated states. Here are some more critical differences regarding the state's program. The entity submitting the application on behalf of the state must be designated in writing by the governor or equivalent that they are the officially appointed vehicle for their state's Gear Up application. Done on the one-page state applicant eligibility form found in the application package, which the governor must sign. A state may also only have one service-providing state Gear Up project at a time. Therefore, for the 2023 competition, only states without current grants or whose current grant ends on or before September 30th, 2023 are eligible to apply. Note that there are few grantees still open under data collection supplemental no-cost extension periods that run a few more years, and of that set, those without another service-providing state Gear Up project are allowed to apply. The state may opt to have more than one entity deliver the services. In fact, what makes the Gear Up States program special is that there's an immense amount of variety in the types of service provision that can be provided by the state, local school districts, and institutions of higher education working together. States may implement the whole grade, priority students, and/or public housing models, which we will discuss in detail a bit further on. Gear Up State statute directs how project funds should be allocated, broadly speaking, into two components: your program activities and your scholarship component. At default, an applicant must allocate at least 50% of funds to establish or maintain a financial assistance program that awards scholarships to participants. At least 25% and up to 50% of funds would then be spent on allowable program activities. An applicant can apply for a waiver to exempt them from this allocation for scholarships, and we'll discuss that a little later. Here's a list of activities that projects are required to implement. These activities are outlined in the Gear Up statute. Projects must provide information to students on college financial aid and also encourage student enrollment in rigorous or challenging curricula in order to reduce the need for remedial coursework at post-secondary level. A rigorous program of study is very important. Research has shown that students that undertake a rigorous secondary school program of study are more likely to enroll in a program of post-secondary education. Research also shows that students that complete a rigorous secondary school program of study are more likely to complete a post-secondary education and pursue a post-secondary degree. We define rigorous and challenging curricula as rigorous academic curricula, which may include college preparatory, advanced placement, or international baccalaureate programs, and providing participating students access to rigorous core academic courses that reflect challenging state academic standards. Projects must also provide activities designed to improve the number of participating students who obtained a secondary school diploma and complete applications for and enroll in a program of post-secondary education. And lastly, state projects are required to provide scholarships to Gear Up students, which we'll discuss more in depth shortly. Here's a list of permissible activities, meaning projects have the option to implement them. Providing tutors and mentors, conducting outreach activities to recruit priority students, which we'll define for you later when we talk about the implementation models. Supporting the development of rigorous academic curricula, including college prep, advanced placement, or IB. Supporting dual or concurrent enrollment programs. Providing intensive extended school day, school year, or summer programs. Introducing students to IHEs through college visits. Fostering and improving parent and family involvement. Disseminating information and other activities designed to ensure secondary school completion and post-secondary enrollment for at-risk children. The Gear Up statute and regulation also spell out certain allowable activities that only state grantees can carry out to set them apart from partnership grants. These include providing technical assistance to secondary schools or Gear Up partnership grants in your state, providing professional development to individuals working with Gear Up student cohorts, providing strategies and activities that align efforts in the state to prepare eligible students to attend and succeed in post-secondary education, disseminating info on the use of scientifically valid research and best practices to improve services to eligible students, working to align state academic standards and curricula with the expectations of post-secondary institution and employers, and more, which you can find listed in the program regulations. I will now turn to my colleague and Gear Up Lead Program Specialist, Ben, for a discussion of Gear Up implementation models.
Thanks, Reggie. There are two student implementation models for Gear Up, the cohort model and the priority students model. The Gear Up state project may also implement a combination of both models. The cohort model has two approaches, the whole grade approach and the public housing approach. Both of these models must begin serving students by no later than the 7th grade. We will provide more details about each implementation model in the slides that follow. Regarding the whole grade cohort approach, there are 4 factors to keep in mind. First, services must be provided to an entire grade level of students until they move on to another school. And in those projects that have a 7th year, applicants have the option of continuing to provide services through the student's first year of attendance at an institution of higher education. Second, the school must have a 7th grade class. 3, at least 50% of the students at the target school or schools must be eligible for free and reduced price lunch. And 4, the project must continue to provide services to the substantial majority of students when the cohort moves on to another school or schools. Now, we always say that your data should be from within the last 3 years so that it is timely, relevant, and accurate. However, given the pandemic era flexibilities offered in recent years, one common question we've received this year is how to account for situations where a school district received a pandemic era waiver that allowed their entire school population to be eligible for free and reduced lunch, resulting in insufficient data on true eligibility figures for the years 2020-21 and 2021-22. We realize that may be the case for some of you, and so we will allow that you may need to go back to the 2019-2020 year to have the most accurate data. We consider this a temporary step away from the standard requirement that your data not be older than 3 years out of date, and the non-federal reviewers who read your applications will be instructed accordingly. Now back to the idea of the substantial majority. What constitutes a substantial majority? Your substantial majority will vary in some instances. Your majority could be as little as the 20% of the original cohort if the cohort has split into various high schools. In other instances, a substantial majority could be higher depending on the district's feeder patterns. For example, in New York City, when the students move on to high school, students have the option to attend over 200 different high schools, and obviously a Gear Up grantee will not have the resources to serve that many schools. The grantee would be required to only serve the school or schools that constitute a substantial majority. On the other hand, rural schools rarely have this problem, as most feed directly into 1 or 2 high schools. Now, as an option, if your substantial majority is low, in the 20 to 50% range, for instance, a grantee could add 9th grade students who are not part of the original cohort. This is an ed policy and not a statutory or regulatory requirement. Then we have the public housing cohort. The public housing cohort approach requires a project to fully provide services to students who reside in public housing. If you're interested in implementing this approach, you can find the names and addresses of public housing authorities by contacting the Department of Housing and Urban Development local offices or through the HUD website at www.hud.gov. Then finally, we have the priority student model. Here's the criteria for the second model, the priority students model. This is where you'll serve students in secondary schools through the 12th grade who are eligible in the following ways. First, to be counted under Section 1124C of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, known as Title I. This is where students that are eligible for free and reduced price lunch are defined. Second, is eligible for assistance under a state program funded under Part A or E of Title IV of the Social Security Act. Title IV awards grant grants to states for aid and services to needy families with children and for child welfare services, foster children, and youth involved in the juvenile justice system. Third, are eligible for assistance under Subtitle B of Title VII of the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, or four, are otherwise considered to be a disconnected student. Now, the term disconnected student was deliberately left undefined in the Higher Education Opportunity Act, which provides applicants flexibility in selecting students under this model. Now, let's talk about the scholarship component. Projects must offer financial assistance to Gear Up students. The minimum amount the state must award to a student is the minimum Pell amount for the year they are attending college. Students are eligible to receive a scholarship if they, 1, have participated in a Gear Ups project, 2, are under 22 years of age, 3, possess a high school diploma or equivalent, and 4, are enrolled or accepted for enrollment at an institution of higher education. Scholarship funds must be held in reserve, at least the minimum scholarship amount multiplied by the estimated number of eligible students. For this estimation, you may use the current year's Pell amount at time of the grant award as a minimum, but we recommend also including extra funds to estimate what the Pell amount will be at the time the scholarship is given, to make sure you have set aside enough funds to award scholarships by the time they are needed. However, state projects using a priority model may award scholarships directly rather than holding funds in reserve, if applicable, because they would likely have graduating students enrolling in college much sooner. All projects must provide all Gear Up students with a 21st Century Scholarship Certificate. The certificate is a way to celebrate Gear Up students' accomplishments. The certificate must be personalized and can be signed by a superintendent, university president, principal, or Gear Up director, for instance. The reverse side of the certificate must include a summary of how much federal aid may be available to the student. While the Gear Up statute states that every project must provide for scholarships with its funding, it also establishes for an exception to this rule, seeing as many states already have other sources of funding to provide college scholarships to Gear Up eligible students. To receive this exception or waiver of the requirement to dedicate 50% of grant funds to a scholarship component, an applicant must demonstrate that they have another means or multiple means of providing scholarships that meet the minimum Pell Grant requirements. This request and justification for a waiver should be indicated on the applicant's program profile page, and if necessary, you may also attach an additional page or pages. An applicant's request for an exception must provide documentation of the other means or multiple means for providing the scholarship, including a comprehensive list of other sources of aid that reduce or eliminate the need for the grantee to provide Gear Up scholarships to eligible students out of their federal funding, the projected number of students of the grantee expects to receive aid through those sources, and an estimate of the number of students eligible for a Gear Up scholarship that are not expected to receive aid through those other sources, if any. For example, examples of non-federal funding that could contribute include state scholarship programs, local government scholarships if applicable, private foundations or charities that give scholarships, etc. For purposes of the scholarship waiver calculations in the calculation for how much to put into reserves, applicants can use the current year Pell amount at time of the grant award for their estimates as a minimum, but we would recommend including extra funds by estimating what the Pell will be at the time the scholarship is given to make sure they have enough funds for the actual scholarships. It's important to note, like with any part of your program budget, you can and will revisit these budget estimates annually as your project implementation plays out. We've received a few questions already about the logistics involved with ensuring that every student receives a scholarship. One question involved what to do if a student does not complete your internal scholarship application process, and another with what to do if a student has not completed the FAFSA for federal student aid. We want to emphasize that a student not filling out your internal application or not completing the FAFSA does not excuse that student or you from the requirement that the student receive a scholarship either from GEAR Up or from another source. I will now pass the mic to my teammate Marcus Thomas for a discussion of GEAR Up matching and budget requirements. Marcus.
Good morning, everyone. So another major aspect of the GEAR Up competition we need to discuss is the program's matching requirements, which come from the statute. State projects are required to match the federal contribution dollar for dollar. Specifically, non-federal contribution must equal at least 50% of the total project cost. So as an example, if your total project as designed is expected to cost $2 million annually, you should request $1 million in federal funds and prepare to contribute $1 million in non-federal matching funds. Matching may be provided in cash or in kind and may be accrued over the full duration of the grant award period. The full match does not have to be met every year, but is assessed on a cumulative basis. With that being said, state grants must make substantial progress toward meeting the matching requirement in each year of the grant. So what does this mean? Grants should be prepared to show that they've made gradual improvement annually toward the cumulative end of cycle matching requirement, with the goal of closing out the 6 or 7 year award in compliance. We'll use matching updates on your annual performance reports to assess your progress and identify any early warning signs that might necessitate technical assistance, intervention, or correction. It is critical to understand that the applicant and the applying agency or school that submits the application on behalf of the state is the fiscal agent for the grant and thus is responsible for documenting all matching contributions throughout the life of the grant. Matching contributions may be made from any non-federal source and must be documented. This documentation must be adequately maintained and consistent, and the value of in-kind contributions must be clearly maintained and understandable in the event of an outside audit review. Matching is such a large component of GEAR Up projects that many successful projects over the years have found it invaluable to invest in a full-time or part-time staff member whose sole responsibility is to constantly keep track of match contributions. So that's something you may want to consider. I want to take a second here to note that you may have heard about being able to receive a waiver to lessen or eliminate the matching requirement. That statute is only allowable for partnership grants, not state grants. States are not eligible to waive any portion of their matching requirement. Now, after talking through the scholarship and matching aspects of GEAR Up, it's important to spend a moment on your application's overall program budget. There are a few places where you will indicate your budget in the application and attachments, and they each have a purpose. So please do not neglect them. As a reminder, there are 3 key considerations to keep in mind regarding any expenses you build into your budget. The expense must be allowable, that is, permitted under the cost principles in the uniform guidance. Allocable, which means the expense is aligned to the statutory activities and necessary for the project's success. And reasonable, meaning that the cost is one that will be incurred by a prudent person. As an example of a situation where you might question an allowable cost, we've received a question about paying for processing fees from a third party for scholarship disbursement services. Like any potential project budget costs, this will fall under the stipulations that expenses be reasonable, allocable, allowable, and necessary. If the project feels like these fees would meet these requirements, there's nothing that would explicitly make it unallowable. You should be aware that indirect costs are limited to an entity's negotiated indirect cost rate agreement or 8% of the modified total direct cost base, whichever is less. Please do keep in mind that either one of these two options must be an approved rate by a federal agency. Applicants should submit a detailed budget narrative for the first year of the grant on the first year budget narrative form. This is a one-page form in the program-specific form section at the back of the application package, but you will likely need to expand on it with an additional page or more. Each applicant must include a budget narrative for each budget line item for year one, which explains the basis for estimating the cost of professional personnel salaries, benefits, project staff travel, materials and supplies, consultants and subcontracts, indirect costs, and any projected expenditures. The basis for how your scholarship total is calculated. Explain how the major cost items relate to the proposed activities. The cost of evaluation. And finally, a detailed description explaining the matching funds. Then we have the project budget summary form, which is where you will summarize the line items and total bottom line request amounts for all 6 or 7 years of your project. Please note that the proposed budget amounts in years 2 to 7 should not exceed the amount that is proposed in the first year. For example, if you request $3 million in year 1, you cannot request more than $3 million in successive years. You can plan to have your budget go down some years and then back up to meet the expected needs in any given phase of your project, but you can never request an increase over what was requested in year 1. If there are any discrepancies in how much you are requesting between this form, the first year budget narrative, the Ed 424, Ed 524, or anywhere else in the application, please know that the project budget summary form is what we consider to be the official and final answer as to how much you are requesting. So please be accurate. Now that we've covered a number of important topics, and we're sure you've thought of a question or two for us, as a reminder, we'll be doing questions and answers at the end of the whole presentation. So during this 10-minute break, please jot down any thoughts you have so you don't forget them. We'll now take a 10-minute break before going into a discussion of the Gear Up selection criteria. We'll be back and ready to resume this webinar at 9:45.
All right, let's go ahead and get started again with the selection criteria. The selection criteria is the most important part of the presentation, since the possibility of you getting a Gear Up grant is based on how well you respond to the criteria. We recruit experts from the field to evaluate the merits of your application based on your response to the selection criteria. There will be 3 experts to a panel, and we rank all applications based on the average panel score received. While there is not an explicit page limit for this competition, we strongly recommend that you keep your narrative to 65 pages or fewer. You want to take the time to construct responses that are clear and concise. Note that the selection criteria for this year's competition are somewhat different from past years, so please pay careful attention to each criterion as you write your narratives. Here's how your application will be scored to receive funding. There are 5 main selection criteria categories. First, the needs section is worth a maximum of 15 points. The quality of project design section is worth up to a maximum of 30 points. The adequacy of resources is worth up to 15 points. The quality of project personnel is worth up to 20 points. And the quality of project evaluation is worth up to 20 points, for a total of 100 points in the main selection criteria. The bottom of the slide lists the competitive preference priorities. States have 2 competitive preference priorities to which they can respond for additional points. First, from statute comes the successful state Gear Up grantee prior to August 2008 priority, which is worth up to 2 points. And second, from the Secretary's list of priorities this year comes the increasing post-secondary education access, affordability, completion, and post-enrollment success priority, which is worth up to a maximum of 8 points. Let's talk about the first section of the selection criteria, the need for the project, which is worth a maximum of 15 points. This section provides the baseline data for your proposed project. The baseline data is very important in establishing the fact that there is a need for the project in the target school or area. Outcome measures for objectives are based on need. Services and resources are based on need. It is the foundation that sets the stage. In determining the need for the proposed project, the Secretary considers the following 3 factors. First, the magnitude or severity of the problem to be addressed by the proposed project, worth up to 5 points. Second, the extent to which the proposed project will provide services or otherwise address the needs of students at risk of educational failure, worth up to 5 points. And third, the extent to which the proposed project will focus on serving or otherwise addressing the needs of disadvantaged individuals, worth up to 5 points. Here are some questions to consider in your need plan. What gaps are there in services to students, and how do you plan to address them? What opportunities are lacking? How does your application close these weaknesses? You must thoroughly assess the needs of the target population, the students, the parents, the teachers. Everything is based on the needs assessment. It's like a circular process. You do a thorough needs assessment, you develop your goals and objectives based on those needs, you develop and implement activities and services, and then you evaluate what you've done for continuous improvement. And then guess what? You start that process over again. Now, when it comes to the data that you provide in your needs section and throughout your application, you need to consider some important factors that they be relevant, credible, current, and comparative. Your data should be relevant. The data provided should relate to the needs of the target population, such as rates of high school persistence and graduation, availability and success of a rigorous program of study, post-secondary enrollment and completion rates, and other indicators. Your data should also be credible. Please indicate the source of your data in your application. You should provide data that comes from a source that is credible and trustworthy, such as a federal or state government agency. Your data should also be current. Our experience has shown that data remains fairly consistent over a 3-year period. Therefore, to reduce the burden on applicants, you can provide data for the most recent year available, generally no more than 3 years old. An exception for this year's competition, which we discussed earlier, is the school free and reduced price lunch data. Because of pandemic era data unavailability, you may go back 4 years to the 2019-2020 year. But otherwise, if outdated, you should provide a good justification for using such data. And lastly, your data should be comparative. You should provide comparative data. For instance, you could compare student achievement rates of your target schools to national, state, or local rates. It helps provide the context to show why your data shows need. The next area of the selection criteria is the project design, which is worth a maximum of 30 points. In determining the quality of project design, the secretary considers the following factors. First, the extent to which the goals, objectives, and outcomes to be achieved by the proposed project are clearly specified and measurable. This is worth up to 8 points. For example, how well do you tie the objectives to a measurable goal? Where are you now? Where are you going? And how do you plan to accomplish the end result? Second criteria is the extent to which the proposed project demonstrates a rationale as defined in the notice inviting application. This is worth up to 7 points. This second subpart requires some further explanation and an understanding of the term rationale, which again is defined in the NIA. When you're asked to demonstrate a rationale, that entails providing a graphical logic model and narrative that illustrates how your intended inputs, resources, and activities will lead to your intended programmatic outcomes. You must explain the logic of how your program design will lead to your expected outcomes. This should tie together how and why your project design will be successful. You see on this slide here, we've just listed an example of a graphical logic model that you could emulate. And this is just an example. You can do many different types of logic models. The project design section continues with 2 more criteria. Third, the extent to which the proposed project represents an exceptional approach for meeting statutory purposes and requirements. This is worth up to 8 points. Here, this is where you should thoroughly detail your plans for executing on all of the statutorily required program services, as well as any permissible program services you choose to incorporate. You should explain how each service will be carried out, when, where, by whom, for which population, etc. You should make a case for how this plan of action constitutes an exceptional approach to meeting the goals, objectives, and purpose of the Gear Up program in your targeted community or communities. You should show intentionality in your program design so that you make the best case for how your design will lead to exceptional results. As an example, where possible, applicants could consider activities and services that have proven to be effective based on past evidence and rigorous evaluation, and also provide pertinent citations of studies and literature when possible. You want to assure reviewers that the proposed activities and services are likely to accomplish the mission of the Gear Up program. And lastly, the 4th project design criterion: how the applicant will ensure that a diversity of perspectives are brought to bear in the operation of the proposed project, including those of parents, teachers, the business community, a variety of disciplinary and professional fields, recipients or beneficiaries of services, or others as appropriate. This is worth up to 7 points. Gear Up projects thrive best when a multitude of perspectives are brought together to create the best, most effective learning environment for Gear Up students. Here, you should describe how this will look in your individual states. Okay, I will now turn it over to my colleague Antoinette Edwards to walk us through the remainder of the selection criteria.
Good morning. The next section of the selection criteria is adequacy of resources, worth a total of 15 points. There are 3 sub-questions. In determining the adequacy of resources for the proposed project, the Secretary considers, first, the adequacy of support, including facilities, equipment, supplies, and other resources from the applicant organization or the lead applicant organization, and the relevance and demonstrated commitment of each partner in the proposed project to the implementation and success of the project. This is worth up to 5 points. Note the different elements included here. A response here should be sure to include evidence of committed support by both the applicant organization and by each identified committed partner you propose to work with. As we said earlier, Gear Up projects are most successful when there are strong, long-lasting commitments from your critical partners, whether it be at the state, local government, local school district, institutions of higher education, nonprofits, or community agencies. Remember to emphasize your matching contributions here. The matching component of Gear Up is key to the project's success. Federal and state agencies, schools, colleges or universities, businesses, etc., play an important role in efforts to increase the number of low-income students who are prepared for and succeed in post-secondary education. Second, the extent to which the costs are reasonable in relation to the number of persons to be served and to the anticipated results and benefits. This is worth up to 5 points. Here, you want to make the case that your budget, as presented on your first year budget narrative form, please keep in mind it is your first year budget narrative form, is made up of costs that are reasonable, which, if you recall, means that they are costs a prudent person would incur. Keep in mind, we said a prudent person. A way to think about that is that a reasonable cost is one that would not make waves in a negative way on the front page of your local paper or the Washington Post. And third, the potential continued support of the project after federal funding ends, including, as appropriate, the demonstrated commitment of appropriate entities to such support, up to 5 points. A successful Gear Up project cannot be measured solely by project performance. A truly successful Gear Up project will continue beyond federal funding. Your project design should have the right quality and quantity of resources, that's time, money, and staff, to sustain the project after federal funds have been depleted. Quality of personnel. The maximum points is 20. In determining the quality of project personnel, the Secretary considers the extent to which the applicant encourages applications for employment from persons who are members of groups that have been traditionally underrepresented based on race, color, national origin, gender, age, or disability. This is up to 5 points. The Secretary also considers the qualifications of the project director or the principal investigator, including relevant training and experience, up to 5 points, as well as the qualifications of other key personnel, up to 5 points. Lastly, the extent to which the time commitments of the project director and principal investigator and other key project personnel are appropriate and adequate to meet the objectives of the proposed project, up to 5 points. A few words about these criteria. Your plan to hire and encourage applications from underrepresented population should be just that, a plan, not just a statement of non-discrimination or an assurance. You should, for example, explain how you will target advertisements to certain populations, ensure a diverse interviewing, hiring panel, etc. Qualifications. You should clearly outline the minimum amount of work-related qualifications of key personnel as in the position description. The minimum educational qualifications may include the types of degree required and the acceptable fields of study for the director's position and all other key personnel. Do not rely on reviewers to search through the application for pertinent credentials and experience of key personnel. Applicants are not required to submit resumes or job descriptions. This information can be described or summarized. A resume of a person already in the position is insufficient, as it does not detail what qualifications would be required of a new hire should the position become vacant later on. And the final selection is project evaluation, worth 20 points in total. The secretary considers the following factors: the extent to which the methods of evaluation include the use of objective performance measures that are clearly related to the intended outcomes of the project and will produce quantitative and qualitative data to the extent possible, up to 10 points. The extent to which the methods of evaluation will provide performance feedback and permit periodic assessment of progress toward achieving intended outcomes, up to 10 points. A few notes for your evaluation sections. The evaluation plan should flow from the identified needs, established goals and objectives, implementation of programs and strategies, the reassessment of needs, and ultimately continuous program improvement. Again, like a circular process, you'll also likely want to tie it closely to your logic model from the project design section, as your evaluation is your opportunity to see if those impactful connections you expected are coming true. The basic 2 evaluation questions are: what is the project attempting to accomplish? 2, has the project succeeded in accomplishing what is set out to accomplish? A thorough evaluation plan should include both formative and summative evaluation components. A formative evaluation monitors project activities as they progress, assesses whether processes and procedures are working, whether project materials are sound and effective, and whether participants are satisfied with services, and finally, produces information which is used to incrementally improve the project. It's also a good opportunity to revisit the logic module and determine whether or not the assumptions are correct and the interventions are aligned to student, family, community needs and being provided in the adequate dosage. Also, to ask the question, do the interventions/resources need to be adjusted? Summative evaluation looks at data collected and analyzed to assess the project's ultimate effectiveness and impact. Its major purpose is to document the extent to which the project achieved its immediate and long-term outcomes. You should consider qualitative and quantitative data. Qualitative data such as students' perceptions and morale, parent and teacher expectations, quality of current services in the school and community, communication barriers, and lack of administrative support. Quantitative data such as student graduation rates, performance on standardized tests, attendance patterns, counselor-student ratio, dropout rates, and retention rates. Internal or external evaluators. You can use either internal or external evaluators to conduct the evaluation. Each has its own advantages and disadvantages. Internal evaluators are usually program staff, colleagues, or project participants. These individuals may know more about the real issues related to the program, and their observations may be trustworthy and useful. However, they also may be biased. External evaluators, on the other hand, are consultants or experts in the field of service provision or research. They may add credibility and objectivity. However, they may be costly. Now, before we move on to the competitive preference priorities, I want to emphasize a few things that do not have explicit criteria tied to them, but are overarching concepts that would generally strengthen your application in these proceedings areas if you incorporate them well. Some things to consider in developing your application narrative, especially when it comes to the active day-to-day operation of the project and implementation of activities. You'll want to think about your organization structure, policy and procedures, functional responsibilities of management and staff, lines of authority, and procedures for planning, implementing, documenting, and assessing all activities. On time within budget. Applicants should be able to show that proposed activities and tasks are accomplished on time and within budget. Procedures. You can include physical and programmatic procedures such as record keeping, personnel, recruitment, acquisition procedures, and contracting procedures. Charts. You can use charts to organize and display project objectives, activities, and tasks, timelines, and key personnel roles and responsibilities. An organizational chart may be useful in presenting your information to reviewers. We will now move to discuss the competitive preference priorities for GERA, state competition. You will hear me refer to the competitive preference priorities as the CPPs here on out. The CPPs are the last source of points for applicants under the FY 2023 Gear Up competition. In order to support and strengthen the work that educators do every day in collaboration with parents, advocates, and community members, the Secretary has issued 6 priorities and related definitions for use in currently authorized discretionary grant programs or programs that may be authorized in the future. The Secretary may choose to use an entire priority for a grant program or a particular competition, or use one or more of the priorities component parts. Including CPPs in your application is optional, though they are key source of extra points, and you may want to strongly consider doing so. If you choose to address any or all of them, we recommend you do so in a brief narrative, 3 pages per CPP, a separate form from your main narrative and upload it in the other attachments section of grants.gov. There are 2 CPPs for the state applicants that are reflected here on slides 38 and 39. The first CP is one you very well may be familiar with when it comes straight from the program statute. It is titled Successful State Gear Up Grant prior to 8/14/2008. And applicants can receive up to 2 additional points by addressing it. We give priority to an eligible applicant for a state Gear Up grant that has A, carried out a successful state Gear Up grant prior to August the 14th, 2008, determined on the basis of data, including outcomes data, submitted by the applicant as part of its annual and final performance reports from prior Gear Up state grants administered by the applicant and the applicant's history of compliance with applicable statutory and regulatory requirements, and B, a prior demonstrated commitment to early intervention leading to college access through collaboration and replication of successful strategies. There is a section on your program profile page where you must indicate that you are eligible for and writing for this CPP, including listing your prior award numbers from the applicable time period. Please note that it is not enough to merely state you had an open state grant in the applicable time period. You must also write a brief narrative explaining how this shows a prior demonstrated commitment to early intervention leading to college access. The second CPP comes from Secretary Cardona's list of published priorities for departmental grant opportunities, and it is titled Increasing Post-Secondary Education Access, Affordability, Completion, and Post-Enrollment Success. And you can earn up to 8 additional points. There are 2 sub-criteria, and you can write to either or both. A, establishing a system of high quality data collection and analysis, such as data on persistence, retention, completion, and post college outcomes for transparency, accountability, and institutional improvement, up to 4 points. And B, providing school students with access to career exploration and advising opportunities to help students make informed decisions about their post secondary enrollment decisions and to place them on a career path, up to 4 points. These represent extensions of work you may already be doing in your grant, but asking you to go a little further. In part, with regards to establishing and utilizing high quality data collection and analysis, notice that all of these factors are already core components in evaluating your project's progress towards your goals and objectives. The idea is that you show how you will either establish such a data system or perhaps more likely expand upon one that you already have available in your state and show how you will use it to improve upon transparency, accountability, and institutional improvement in your state's higher education space. We're asking you to think long term here on how your state's educational data systems can be improved to better serve your students and help you reach your goals in the future. In Part B, with a focus on career exploration, and advising, this is already a permissible activity for your grant. So we're encouraging you to really put some serious thought into how you will best incorporate with your students and schools new career advising methodologies to show the pathways from high school to college and career preparation programs on to rewarding careers. Again, this CPP is worth up to 8 points total, or up to 4 points for each subpart, and we recommend your narrative to be about 3 pages long. I will now pass to my colleague, Ginger Allen.
Good morning. Now that we've wrapped up discussion of the content of your application, let's talk formatting. The NIA provides only recommended formatting, not requirements, though we highly encourage you to keep to these standards so that your application can be easily legible for the reviewers. Recommended formatting includes 65-page narrative plus 3 pages per CPP response, double spaced, 12-point font or larger, and common fonts. We want to take some extra time here to discuss all the forms that you will need to fill out as a part of your application, as there are a lot of them, and we found in our last competition that many applicants failed to properly fill out these forms or left them out entirely, which leads to delays in processing applications and could lead to errors. Please, please, please be sure to include each form completed in its entirety. There is a checklist in the application package that walks you through each of these, so look for that to help you as you submit. First on this slide are all the departmental standard attachments, which are already built into the grants.gov application portal, thankfully, so you cannot skip them. The forms are as follows: application for federal assistance SF 424, Department of Education Supplemental Information Form SF 424, GEPA Section 427. The requirement is different for 2023. Grants.gov lobbying form is formally the Ed Form 80-0013. And last, the disclosure of lobbying activities, SFLL. I want to take a moment to discuss the GEPA form with you. You may well remember writing up a brief one-page GEPA statement in past applications where you just write about how your institution won't discriminate, etc. Well, there is a brand new GEPA requirement in 2023 as of April. There is a form already built into the application portal in grants.gov where you will address several questions. GEPA Section 427 requires that applicants, based on the design of their proposed grant project, the participants and community the project proposes to serve, and local circumstances, determine the extent to which identified barriers prevent equitable access to or participation in their federal grant projects. If you look towards the end of the Gear Up application package, there is a page called Instructions for Standard Forms, with a link to an ed.gov page where you can download instructions for all of these forms, including the new GEPA form. We also have a link to a training video on the Gear Up website where you can view a tutorial about this new form as well. Then we also have our Gear Up program-specific forms, which are the ones most commonly forgotten because grants.gov does not walk you through them. You have to access them in the application package where you can download them, edit them, and save them. Then you will upload them to the other attachments section in grants.gov. The only two items listed here that do have their own preset slot in grants.gov are the abstract form, which is 1 page max, and the project narrative form. This can be both your main selection criteria narrative and your priority responses. The rest you have to make sure you upload separately under other attachments. As mentioned earlier, you are required to include the state applicant eligibility form signed by your governor or equivalent if you're from DC or a territory. Then you have your program profile. Again, this can be found in the application package and is several pages long. It collects in one place all the critical elements of your application, summarizing them in a way that is critical to your screening and processing of applications. Please do not forget to fill in your profile. Elements included here are checking off if you've responded to the CPPs, identifying partners, indicating your implementation model, your target schools if applicable, including indicating free reduced lunch percentages, your number of participants served, and the services you plan to provide in list form. You also spell out your federal funding request again here. And we have some questions here designed to help you make sure you're not requesting too much funding and that you're allocating between scholarships and activities correctly and that you're proposing the correct amount of match. If you are requesting a scholarship waiver, you need to indicate that here. There's a text box to enter a short justification, but you may also attach a separate page or pages for your request. You will also report here on your indirect cost rate agreement if applicable. Then there is the project budget summary form. Of course, note that this is 2 pages, one for your federal funds and one for your non-federal matching funds, listed out for the entire 6 or 7 years of the grant. Remember that you cannot request to increase any year above the amount requested for year 1. Also, as mentioned earlier, we consider this form to represent your official budget request for each year of the grant. So please be careful to be accurate here. Finally, there is the first year budget narrative form, which we've mentioned a few times. As you can see, it breaks down into the various budget categories with a table to show your federal and non-federal contributions. This form also for a written narrative that justifies each budget line, so you are very likely going to need to attach additional pages to this document. I will now turn to my teammate, Caroline Chung, to walk us through final submission logistics and the competition timeline.
Thank you, Ginger. So now we're going to head into the submission logistics. As mentioned earlier, all applicants must submit their application through the grants.gov electronic portal unless a waiver is granted for a paper application. Please be sure to carefully read all instructions, and any technical questions should be referred to the grants.gov help desk. All applications submitted in grants.gov must be in the PDF format. Program-specific questions should be directed to the Gear Up program staff, which you may find the staff directory for organized by state on our website. Please be sure to submit your application before the deadline ends. You have until 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on July 31st, 2023 to submit. You will also want to make sure that the applying organization's Unique Entity Identifier, or UEI number, is active and registered in sam.gov. The system for award management requires that UEIs be re-registered annually, so there's a chance it has expired if you haven't submitted for any other federal awards recently. Be sure to check your organization's UEI status in sam.gov well in advance of submission. Re-registering for your UEI can take a few days, so you do not want to find out you need to re-register on the final day for submission, as you may be too late. Here, I will go over the application process. Again, all applications must be submitted via grants.gov. Your application will be reviewed and scored by a panel of 3 peer reviewers. The highest score an applicant can receive is 100 points, plus up to 10 for the CPPs. We will come up with one numeric score by determining the average of the 3 reviewers' scores. All final scores are ranked highest to lowest, and all successful applicants will receive a 6 or 7 year grant award. Here is one more look at the timeline. The Gear Up State Notice inviting applications published in the Federal Register was on June 1st, 2023. The deadline or closing date for submissions of applications is July 31st, 2023. And the technical review process will commence very shortly after that, and we estimate an announcement of awards in September 2023. So now we will move on to our Q&A session. We have presented a lot of information today, and as our Director Craig mentioned before, while we'll try to answer as many questions as possible, we can't promise we'll be able to be all-inclusive today. So further questions you may have can be addressed to our office via email.
Thanks, Caroline. Again, everyone, this is Craig Pooler, Director. We're now opening the session for Q&A. You can post your questions in the chat box. You will hear silence as we confer a team on looking at the questions, but assure you we are here and we will begin answering questions. So if you hear silence, that's just because we're meeting. Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone for your good questions so far. The first thing we want to emphasize is that we will be sharing the slides. So if you need to look back and review any of the slides, we'll be emailing those out to every attendee, to the emails in which you signed in to the meeting. We have also been recording this webinar, so our plan is to post it to the Office of Post-Secondary Education, Higher Education Programs YouTube page, and our plan is, if all goes well, to link that on our website as well. So knock on wood, we'll be able to do that. So let's get into some of these questions. So one question we have is regarding the scholarship exemption. Do the alternate scholarships need to be designated only for Gear Up students, or can they be available to any student who meets the scholarship eligibility, whether merit-based and/or need-based? The alternate scholarships do not have to only be designated for Gear Up students. They can be a broader, more broadly applicable scholarship to students in your state. But if you're proposing to use them to count as your Gear Up scholarships, you just need to make sure that they don't impose additional eligibility requirements on your Gear Up students. For instance, GPA requirements, because that's not the standard for the Gear Up scholarship. The Gear Up scholarship should be the standard is that you must provide for a scholarship to every student.
Hello, everyone. This next question asks, because the partnership identification sheet was removed from the application, what specifically would demonstrate adequate commitment of partners within the application? For example, in the adequacy of resources section mentioned earlier. So the forms for the partner identification sheets were revised, removed, but they were added to the program profile. So there's a section in the project profile sheet where you can list your partners. So we did away with the forms, but we included that section on the program profile. So that's where you will list your partners and that information that you use to report on each individual page partnership identification sheet. So it's just moved to a different section. Hopefully that answered the question there. As Ben said, we did receive a question. Can we review the scholarship waiver requirements again? Again, it's been recorded for this purpose. The recording will be posted to our division's YouTube page. So we're trying to be more innovative. And we will post that link on our webpage, and you can go back. If you joined late and missed certain sections, you can go back, or if someone from your institution you want to share the link or let them know, they can go and view today's recording. So thank you for that question.
Our next question has to do with the state applicant eligibility form, which is we say has to be signed by the governor. We do ask that yes, it be signed by the governor. That's been standard for a few competition cycles now. Some grantees might be used to doing a letter, but we've simplified that to the form. So we ask that you have the governor sign that form.
Okay, the next question is, I have a letter from the governor. Do I also need to ask her to sign the form from grants.gov, or can it be an attachment? It can be an attachment. You have a letter from the governor. You do not need to do the one that's on the in the system. You just attach that letter and the other, and we're no. Thank you for that question.
Hi, everybody. So for the next question, we see for CPP number 1 for a prior grant, does the prior grant need to have been completed prior to 8/14/2008 or just awarded and implemented? The answer is it just needs to be awarded by 8/14/2008. It does not have to have been completed by that date.
Okay, we are still open for questions, and we are here. Please put your questions or type them into the chat box. We have answered all the questions in the chat box, so please feel free and ask questions you may have.